The Trump administration has announced a rule that would let the government detain migrant families indefinitely. It would replace a decades-old agreement called the Flores settlement and remove a 20-day limit on detaining families in immigration jails. The White House is defending the move. In a statement, it writes, quote, "The Flores loophole has been exploited by human smugglers and others who use children as pawns to bring illegal aliens into the country. This administration's action makes clear that human smugglers will no longer be able to profit from the Flores loophole." President Trump also addressed the decision before leaving for Kentucky earlier today.
So President Obama had separation. I'm the one that brought them together. This new rule will do even more to bring them together. But it was President Obama that had the separation. We're being very strong on the border. You see the numbers are way, way down. I want to thank Mexico for that. The United States could make your question could make that problem go away very easily if the Democrats would meet and we could fix the loopholes and asylum, which is what you're talking about to an extent. But let me just tell you, very much I have the children on my mind.
Okay, let's bring in Bob Cusack in Washington. He's editor-in-chief of The Hill. Bob, thank you for joining us. Lots of information to break down here. So I want to start with immigration policy. What is the White House's strategy behind this immigration plan? Does it have anything to do with deterrence?
Well, that's what the White House says, and I think their strategy here is, remember, this has to be agreed to by a judge, an Obama appointee that has not agreed with the Trump administration on immigration before, actually has not agreed with the Obama administration before as well. So I think this is going to be just the first step of many legal steps. The administration knows that it's not going to win in the courts on this probably in the short term, but their goal is to get this to the Supreme Court and make their argument this is a loophole. But in the meantime, you have this indefinitely holding migrants, and that is going to cause, I think, some negative headlines for the administration. But this is something that Trump's base loves, and he has been fairly consistent on it.
Well, you say that the president is playing the long game here, it sounds like. Now, Congress is back in session in a couple of weeks. How can we expect Democrats to react to this plan?
Well, certainly Democrats very critical of this, and we've already seen that some today. This is kind of a softball for the 2020 presidential candidates as well as congressional leaders. At the same time, I'm interested to see how Republican leaders address this. Are they going to be putting out statements? Are they going to be defending this policy change, which is highly controversial? But it is something that is going to play into 2020. Immigration is going to be front and center. I think immigration and health care are going to be two big issues. Certainly, the president loves talking about immigration. He loves talking about the immigration more than the economy, which, of course, he fares better on in polls than on immigration.
Yeah, he certainly rallies the base with the immigration talk. Now, members of his administration, like Kevin McAleenan, today said, quote, "This rule allows the federal government to enforce immigration laws as passed by Congress." So what exactly does that mean? Why is the White House trying to frame the change this way?
Well, they knew that it was going to attract some negative press and certainly some negative press on the campaign trail. So they were out at this press conference today, as well as going on TV, making the case this is something that, listen, we have to enforce our laws, and Congress is not changing the laws. So this is, I think, is just another example of the administration, like prior administrations, frankly, not being able to get something through Congress and then doing it through executive order. And the question is, do they have the power to actually do this? This was a regulation, a final regulation, and those always go to court.
Yeah, well, it certainly faces a long legal battle ahead, it sounds like. Now, I want to pivot to the economy. The president said yesterday he's considering a payroll tax cut. Now, today, he says he's not looking at a tax cut and says the economy is strong. Why is he going back and forth on this issue so much?
Well, Tom, I mean, this is a fine line the administration and the president has to walk. I mean, they want to make the case that the economy is doing well, and we've seen that from a number of administration officials, whether it's Trump or the vice president, but also trying to make sure the economy is humming going into 2020. And you saw that the president's going back to his finger pointing of Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, and that's going to continue. And the question is, too, is he going to fire Jay Powell? Jay Powell says he can't be fired. Trump says, when we interviewed him earlier this year, said, absolutely, I can fire him. So this is a fine line where they don't want to say we need a stimulus, because then that would suggest the economy is weakening. They want to make the case that this this economy can even get stronger. But the payroll tax is just not going to work because you can't do that administratively. You've got to get that through Congress. It's just something that is not going to fly, certainly with the 2020 campaign in full swing.
Yeah, and the Congressional Budget Office also made headlines today saying that the U.S. deficit will hit $1 trillion by 2020. That's in part because of moves such as the White House's budget deal with Congress and the 2017 Republican tax cuts. So why is this significant? And does it play a role into stoking recession fears?
It does, because we have had a strong economy, but at the same time, in prior strong economies, certainly pre-9/11, the deficits would go down because the government would be taking a lot more money in. That has not been the case, so partly because of spending, as you mentioned. The tax law certainly did not help the deficit because that was not paid for. And it's amazing, like really 10 years after the growth of the Tea Party, we're not seeing really either party talking about lowering the deficit. Some on the left say the deficit doesn't matter, but at the same time, $22 trillion, and it's only going to get worse. At some point, I think Congress and some president is going to have to address spending, whether that's entitlement spending, raising taxes. I don't think this can continue to be with these terrible numbers that the country's in the red.
Yeah, it seems like a few years ago, all you heard from Republicans was the deficit and balancing the budget. Now, I want to change gears here on to gun control. Yesterday, NRA President Wayne LaPierre confirmed he spoke to President Trump. Today, the president said he's dealing with multiple groups and denied telling LaPierre that he wasn't considering more background checks. Let's listen in.
With background checks, we're dealing with Democrats, we're dealing with Republicans, we're dealing with the NRA, we're dealing with gun owners, we're dealing with everybody. And I think we're going to have something, hopefully, that's meaningful. No, I didn't say anything about that. We had a great talk with Wayne yesterday. Didn't say anything about that. We just talked about concepts. Wayne agrees things have to be done also. And we have areas where we can close. And, for instance, we did fix NICS last time. We have a lot of background checks right now. Gun owners can tell you that. Others can tell you that. But there are certain weaknesses. We want to fix the weaknesses.
And so I want to get your thoughts on this. Is the president concerned about committing to either side on gun control?
He goes back and forth. The president has gone back and forth on this issue a lot just in recent days. I think the president wants to do something because he did ban bump stocks. His administration did that after the Las Vegas shooting. And I think he wants to be able to say, well, we did that and we did something else. Maybe it's red flag laws. This is a bipartisan bill in the Senate. Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is working on it with the Democrat, Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut. However, the NRA is not crazy about that. And Democrats say that's not enough, where you red flag people you're concerned about who could possibly go on some type of shooting. So I just think the chances of this are highly unlikely, especially with the president going back and forth. Does he want background checks? Does he not? It's very popular among Democrats, and even some Republicans say expanded background checks are something that should be done. But I don't just see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to see how that all shakes out. Now, the president is canceling his trip to Denmark after its prime minister said she won't discuss the sale of Greenland. But he's still planning to go to the G7 summit in France this weekend. And now the president also says he wants Russia and Vladimir Putin to rejoin the bloc. Now, rewind us, get us up to speed here. Why was Russia even suspended in the first place? And how significant would this be for them to rejoin the bloc?
It'd be very significant, but it's very unlikely that they're going to be allowed back into what would be the renewal of the G8. It was the G7 after Russia was kicked out because they annexed Crimea, and that triggered a worldwide condemnation, and certainly from the Obama administration and some in the Trump administration. Nikki Haley, who's no longer part of the administration, has been very tough on Russia. So this really came out of the blue. He has mentioned it before, but not recently, and the fact that it's coming on the eve of this big meeting. And this divides President Trump from congressional leaders. Mitch McConnell has been accused by Democrats of being friendly with Russia, and they call him Moscow Mitch. He has been very critical of this idea and said no way should they be allowed back in. So on the Greenland issue, it's something that the president was just offended by, that they said, well, there's no way we're going to sell you Greenland. And he admitted today that, yeah, that was the reason he canceled it, and maybe he'll go at a later date. But he was not pleased of how they brushed him off, basically.
Yeah, I still don't know exactly what the strategy was there for attempting to purchase Greenland, whether it be military or for trade routes. But, I guess we'll just have to find out. Bob Cusack, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tom.